I'm highly confident the decision-making process now is vastly more professional and vastly less political than it was in the previous administration.
How am I supposed to evaluate that if there weren't politicals on these review boards before, and now we have politicals in the review boards? So why should I believe that to be the case if there's? Why not let the professionals in your department, and you have some of the best in the entire world, do their job, and then you can make a political decision?
We should have a lunch. We should have a lunch, and you should see how we do things today, and I can show you how things were done before. The change in professionalism and not political professional business evaluation is dramatic.
Welcome back to Bold Beak News, Patriots. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into a recent congressional hearing that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with the establishment's resistance to President Trump's America First agenda. Before we get started, if you believe in putting America first and want to stay informed about the real issues facing our great nation, smash that like button and hit subscribe. We're building a community of patriots who aren't afraid to speak the truth, and your support helps us continue bringing you the unfiltered analysis you won't get from the mainstream media. Today, we're reacting to testimony from what appears to be a House Armed Services Committee hearing where we witnessed yet another establishment politician launch into a tirade against President Trump's common-sense approach to national defense and foreign policy.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, we've now completed round one. If there is interest in doing a round two, we do need to be out of here by about noon. So what I'm going to propose is that we try to keep our, in the second round, let's try to keep them shorter. In fact, why don't we let each of the Democrats who were, you're finished? Okay. Senator Heinrich, why don't we go to you next and try to, each of us doing it round two, let's try to keep it to a question or two so that we can make sure we're finished by noon, if that's all right. Thank you.
Secretary, in New Mexico, we've got a couple of projects, a geothermal project, and I appreciate your enthusiasm for advanced geothermal, also a grid reliability project. They've both been in the loan program office pipeline for a very long time, and over the course of the last 6 months, the back and forth communication has gone away. And so I would just ask you if you would commit to sort of making sure that your loan program office re-engages with those two projects.
Yes, indeed, Senator.
Thank you. I want to ask you a little bit more about this review board process because you described it as a business review, as professional, not political, but your own attorneys briefed my staff yesterday and said that there were political appointees on those review boards. Is that the case or is that not the case?
Oh, it's absolutely the case.
So my understanding is that in previous administrations, these kinds of reviews have been done by career staff. If it's a business review, why do we have political appointees on these review boards?
Oh, it's a hybrid of the two. I'm pretty confident it was that way before. I don't think the careers would have shoveled out $25 billion in the last 2 days before inauguration. That's not
For example, in the loan program office, there were no politicals on the review board. The final sign-off comes from a political appointee, but prior to that, the actual review committee did not have politicals. So I'm wondering if we want to do this in a professional way, why are we putting politicals on these review boards? Why not save that for the final process and let the professionals do their job?
Senator, I'm highly confident the decision-making process now is vastly more professional and vastly less political than it was in the previous administration.
How am I supposed to evaluate that if there weren't politicals on these review boards before, and now we have politicals in the review boards? So why should I believe that to be the case if there's? Why not let the professionals in your department, and you have some of the best in the entire world, do their job, and then you can make a political decision?
Because the political appointees that are in it are people I chose. They're business leaders, they're entrepreneurs, they're on the political team we came in, but their job is to evaluate the math, the financial statements, go back and forth with questions. They're playing a business role. And if you look at, and we should have a lunch. We should have a lunch, and you should see how we do things today, and I can show you how things were done before. The change in professionalism and not political professional business evaluation is dramatic.
I'm going to wrap up my questions here, and I look forward to having lunch with you. I do want to point out I made a mistake earlier. I cited my cost of retail electricity incorrectly. It was not 12 cents a kilowatt hour. It was 10.8. And that is with 35% solar, 15% wind, 15% battery storage, and only 5% coal, 23% gas. So
Are those capacity or produced energy numbers?
those are capacity numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that my utility provided to me when I asked. So that's the retail price for like an individual at their home. So if they're able to do that at 10.8 cents a kilowatt hour, or even 11 or 12, well below the national average, something's not adding up here.
New Mexico's done a good job. Absolutely.
What we heard in this testimony is a perfect example of the swamp mentality that has gotten our country into the mess we're in today. And frankly, it's exactly why the American people voted overwhelmingly to return Donald Trump to the White House. Let's start with the congressman's complaints about the budget process. Now, I'll give him credit where credit is due. He's absolutely right that we face complex threats from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. These are serious challenges that require serious leadership. But then he immediately pivots to attacking President Trump for supposedly causing budget delays and uncertainty. This is rich coming from someone whose party spent 4 years undermining every single initiative the previous Trump administration tried to implement. They want to complain about continuing resolutions and budget delays. But where were these concerns when Congress was wasting time on impeachment hoaxes instead of doing the people's business? The reality is that President Trump inherited a Pentagon that had been weakened by decades of misplaced priorities, social engineering experiments, and throwing money at problems without demanding results. When Trump talks about 8% cuts across the board, that's called fiscal responsibility, something Washington politicians have forgotten how to practice. For too long, we've had a Department of Defense that's more concerned with sensitivity training and pronouns than with lethality and readiness. Trump is bringing accountability back to an institution that desperately needs it. Now let's talk about this loyalty issue that has the congressman so worked up. He's clutching his pearls about federal employees being tested for whether they support President Trump. But let me ask you something, patriots. Would you want people actively working against your agenda in positions of power within your administration? This isn't about loyalty to Trump the person. It's about loyalty to the America First agenda that the American people voted for. We've seen what happens when you leave deep state operatives in place. They leak classified information, they undermine policy initiatives, and they work overtime to sabotage the will of the voters. The congressman mentions General Milley as an example of someone whose security detail was supposedly removed for political reasons. But let's talk about what Mark Milley actually did. This is the same general who admitted to secretly calling his Chinese counterpart during the final months of the Trump administration, essentially conducting shadow diplomacy behind the back of the elected president. That's not patriotic resistance. That's insubordination at best and borderline treason at worst. If you betray the chain of command and undermine your commander-in-chief, there should be consequences. The idea that such behavior should be rewarded with taxpayer-funded security details is exactly the kind of swamp thinking that needs to be drained. Moving on to defense spending priorities, the congressman attacks several Trump initiatives, including what he calls the Golden Dome Project. Now, I'll admit we don't have all the details on this program yet, but what we do know is that President Trump has consistently prioritized missile defense and protecting American cities from incoming threats. If that's what the Golden Dome is about, then every patriotic American should be supporting it. We've watched as China has developed hypersonic missiles and other advanced weapons systems, while previous administrations were more focused on nation-building in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's about time we had a president who understands that the primary job of our military is to defend the American homeland, not to be the world's policeman. The congressman also mocks Trump's interest in upgrading Air Force One and potentially improving the F-35 fighter jet. But think about this logically, patriots. Air Force One is a symbol of American power and prestige. When foreign leaders see that aircraft, they see America. Previous administrations were perfectly happy to spend trillions on foreign wars, but suddenly we're supposed to penny pinch when it comes to ensuring our president has the best possible aircraft? As for the F-35, if there are ways to make our premier fighter jet even better, shouldn't we be exploring those options? The congressman acts like questioning the status quo is somehow wrong, but that's exactly the kind of thinking that led to cost overruns and delays in the first place. Now let's address the foreign policy section of this testimony, which reveals everything wrong with the establishment's globalist mindset. The congressman complains about America first meaning America alone, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what America first actually means. America first doesn't mean we ignore the world. It means we prioritize American interests in our dealings with other nations. It means we don't sign trade deals that ship American jobs overseas. It means we don't fund foreign aid programs while American cities crumble and American veterans sleep on the streets. The congressman specifically mentions cutting aid programs in Africa and acts like this is some great moral failing. But let me ask you this. Why should American taxpayers be funding programs in foreign countries when we have homeless veterans, failing infrastructure, and communities devastated by the opioid crisis right here at home? Charity begins at home, and it's about time we had a president who understands that his first obligation is to the American people who elected him, not to foreign governments who offer nothing in return. On Ukraine, the congressman's analysis is completely backwards. He claims that Trump showed weakness to Putin, but the exact opposite is true. Under Trump's first term, Russia didn't invade anybody. It was under Obama that Russia took Crimea, and it was under Biden that Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Trump's approach of peace through strength actually worked. Putin respected Trump because he knew Trump was unpredictable and wouldn't hesitate to use American power when necessary. The idea that Trump's current approach somehow encourages Russian aggression ignores the basic timeline of events. The truth about Ukraine is that this conflict has become a money-laundering operation for the military-industrial complex and foreign aid lobby. We've sent hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine with minimal oversight, while American communities struggle with basic needs. That doesn't mean we want to see Ukraine conquered by Russia, but it does mean we should be smart about how we approach this conflict. Trump's promise to end the war quickly isn't moronic, as the congressman suggests. It's exactly what American voters want to hear. They're tired of endless foreign entanglements that drain our resources without clear objectives or exit strategies. Regarding the Middle East, the congressman tries to have it both ways. He acknowledges that there was a ceasefire in Gaza when Trump took office, but then somehow blames Trump for the current situation. This is intellectual dishonesty at its finest. The October 7th attacks and subsequent war in Gaza happened under Biden's watch, not Trump's. Trump's approach to the Middle East, including the Abraham Accords, brought more peace and stability to the region than anything we'd seen in decades. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, taking out terrorists like Soleimani, and building relationships with Arab nations created a framework for lasting peace that the Biden administration completely abandoned. Now we get to the section that really reveals the congressman's true priorities, and that's his lengthy defense of DI programs. He admits that he didn't love the excesses of these programs, but then spends several minutes attacking their removal as some kind of cultural revolution. This perfectly encapsulates the problem with the establishment mentality. They'll acknowledge that DEI programs went too far, but they're more upset about correcting course than they were about the original overreach. Let's be clear about what DEI programs actually did to our military. They prioritized identity politics over merit. They forced service members to sit through training sessions that told white soldiers they were inherently racist. They promoted officers based on demographics rather than qualifications. They turned our military into a social experiment at a time when we face serious threats from peer competitors like China. The congressman can clutch his pearls about book removals all he wants, but the American people understand that our military's primary mission is to fight and win wars, not to serve as a laboratory for progressive social theories. The congressman's emotional appeal about Medgar Evers reveals another fundamental misunderstanding. Nobody is diminishing Evers' legacy or contributions. But the renaming of military bases shouldn't be about erasing history or making political statements. It should be about honoring military tradition and the warriors who built these institutions. Many of these bases were named during periods when the country was trying to heal from civil war and move forward together. Changing names doesn't change history, and it certainly doesn't address any of the real challenges facing our military today. The congressman's comment about needing diversity in military recruitment completely misses the point. Of course, America is diverse, and of course our military should reflect that diversity. But diversity of background is different from diversity ideology. We want the best and brightest Americans serving in our military regardless of their race, gender, or background. What we don't want is a military that's more concerned with checking demographic boxes than with operational readiness and lethality. His mockery of young patriotic Christian men who want to serve reveals the establishment's contempt for the very people who have traditionally formed the backbone of our military. These young men aren't asking for special treatment or discrimination against others. They're asking for a military that respects their values and doesn't treat their faith and patriotism as problems to be solved. When military recruitment is down across all demographics, maybe the solution isn't to double down on divisive ideologies, but to return to the values and mission that made our military the finest fighting force in world history. The congressman's entire testimony reflects a worldview that's fundamentally at odds with what the American people voted for in November. They voted for America first. They voted for peace through strength. They voted for fiscal responsibility and government accountability. They voted for a military focused on winning wars rather than social engineering. They voted for leaders who put American interests ahead of globalist ideology and foreign entanglements. What we heard in this hearing was the establishment's last gasps of resistance to the America First agenda. These are the same people who gave us endless wars in the Middle East, trade deals that gutted American manufacturing, and a foreign policy that enriched our competitors while weakening our own country. They had their chance to lead, and they failed spectacularly. That's why Donald Trump is president again, and that's why patriotic Americans across the country are celebrating the return of common-sense leadership to Washington. The congressman can complain all he wants about Trump's approach to defense policy, but results speak louder than rhetoric. Under Trump's previous term, we rebuilt our military, avoided new wars, negotiated from positions of strength, and put America first in all our international dealings. Compare that to the disaster of the Biden years, with the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, the Ukraine conflict, rising tensions with China, and a military more focused on pronouns than preparedness. Patriots, what we're witnessing is nothing less than the restoration of American strength and sovereignty. The establishment politicians like this congressman had their time, and they squandered it. They turned our military into a social experiment, our foreign policy into a globalist wish list, and our defense spending into a jobs program for contractors and consultants. President Trump is cleaning house and returning our national security apparatus to its core mission, defending America and American interests. The deep state operatives, the globalist politicians, and the military-industrial complex are all working overtime to undermine this America First agenda because they know their gravy train is coming to an end. They've gotten rich and powerful by putting foreign interests ahead of American interests, and they're not going to give up that power without a fight. But the American people have spoken, and they've chosen strength over weakness, America first over globalism, and results over rhetoric. As we move forward, we need to stay vigilant and continue supporting leaders who put America first. The establishment isn't going away quietly, and they'll use every tool at their disposal to try to derail the Trump agenda. But with patriots like you staying informed and engaged, we can ensure that this America First movement continues to deliver results for the American people.